One of my favorite things about my job right now is that when I go to events and I talk to players and they say that my videos or other Yu-Gi YouTubers got them back into Yu-Gi-Oh! I really do love Yu-Gi-Oh! I know that I complain about it sometimes, and there's a lot of negative videos out there about Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, but at the end of the day, there's a reason that I spend so much time out here every single day talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Instead of another card game that I play or even another video game that I play, and it's because this game is awesome. I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is truly one of my best hobbies that I've ever done. Obviously, it's one that I've done the longest, so I really do encourage players and people that quit the game to try to get back into the game. Of course, there's always going to be things to complain about in the current format, no matter what year you're playing in, but overall, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is still just as fun in 2018 for me as it was in 2013 when I started being a competitive player, and I wanted to make this video today directed at people that got out of the game at some point, whether or not it was 1 year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and sort of make a comeback video to help you guys get back into the game, whether or not you had a competitive mindset when you played originally, or if you didn't have a competitive mindset. Hopefully this video can help give you some ideas for where to start, because obviously I can't cover every possible deck, and obviously every player has their own budget, but in today's video I want to focus on what I feel is the sort of best set of tips for players that are looking to get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! After having quit it previously. Now, the tip that I want to put at the very beginning of the video isn't directly about a deck that you should be playing, but rather decks that you shouldn't be playing, and I'm putting this at the beginning of the video because I actually feel this is the most important point I can make in this entire discussion, and that's that do not get baited by nostalgic decks. And what I mean by that is that decks like Blue Eyes and Red Eyes are things that I see people that are returning to the game spend a whole lot of money on and don't see a lot of success. If we're comparing Red Eyes and Blue Eyes, and even decks like Dark Magician, although that deck kind of lowered in price, if you're comparing decks like that to the other decks I'm going to talk about in this video, they're about twice the price, or maybe even if they're equal price, they're about half as effective. So in terms of more bang for your buck, stay away from those nostalgic decks. Now, Konami really pushes products with cards with Blue Eyes on them, with cards with Red Eyes on them. They know that the old school players want to play new school decks with their old cards, but if you really are trying to be a budget player, or if you're just trying to not spend that much money, or if you're trying to make sure that your dollar actually goes somewhere, please at all costs avoid those decks. They are so expensive and they are so not powerful. So if you're getting back in this game, maybe you can play those decks online where you can get all the cards for free, but in terms of physically spending money to play cards at tournaments, that is like the worst investment. And I see so many people get back into the game, spend like $300 on a Blue Eyes deck and go 0-4 at locals, and they wonder why the game is so expensive. It's not that expensive if you know what to buy, but don't buy those older decks. I just want to put that out there at the beginning of this video, because if you learn anything from it, it's just avoid overpriced decks like Blue Eyes and Red Eyes and other nostalgic bait. Moving on, let's talk about some decks that actually are good to invest in, especially if you're someone coming back into the game. So what I want to sort of describe is some decks that actually might have been good the last time you played. Now, this obviously changes depending on when you played, but you would be surprised how many strategies are actually still at least viable for locals and regional qualifiers. Decks like Burning Abyss, Light Sworns, and Mermills get brought up a lot, and they are certainly true. I mean, those three decks are extremely popular and have been around for years. In the case of Light Sworns, it's actually been around for 10 years and is still kicking along, especially at locals. When we're thinking of players getting back into the game, obviously, or at least I shouldn't have to say this, when you're thinking of someone that's taking a deck from 5 or 10 years ago, even with some modern updates, very often those decks are not going to be ready to win a huge tournament. However, what I think is important for someone getting back into the game is just getting back into what Yu-Gi-Oh! Feels like to play. Sort of going to a local tournament, learning some newer decks that came out, maybe something catches your interest, you can play that at the next couple tournaments if you want to, but I think what's important is that you should know if you have older decks sitting around, very often those decks are good enough to actually take to a local tournament and still play them. And even better, in those cases, you might even still remember what those decks did, especially if it wasn't too long ago. maybe just 1 or 2 years ago. So decks like Lightsworn's Mermill's Burning Abyss, but even sort of lesser known strategies that I might not cover in this video, those types of decks, if you feel comfortable with them, are pretty good choices to take to smaller tournaments. And the big reason is that it's very confusing when you go to a tournament and you don't know what your opponent's cards do, but also you don't know what your own cards do. I would say at the minimum you want to know what your own cards do so that you're not confused while you're playing, and this is especially helpful if you already have played with those cards in the past. Although not completely necessary, it definitely is a sort of boost to help you be a more confident player returning to the game. If you sold most of your cards, or you're not interested in playing the decks that you used to play, there certainly are tons of options available, and I can't possibly cover all of them in this video, but I do want to go over my 2 basic options and then one sort of option that's a little bit more expensive. And I really am trying to look from a budget player's mindset, because I think most people that are returning to a card game aren't ready to spend $400 or $500 or $600 even for a top strategy, because chances are, I mean, they don't know if they're going to continue playing the game after a couple months, and if you're only going to get into the game for a month or two, you don't want to waste all of that money. So I think that for me personally, just in general, the best decks for new and returning players are decks with low buy-ins that are very unlikely to get hit on the Forbidden and Limited list, but also, and this is really important, I think a lot of people miss this step, I like decks that even though they are cheap to build the basic model of, it is something that you can actually add more expensive cards to later on if you so choose to invest in them. So let's talk about an aggressive deck, a sort of OTK based strategy that a lot of people are playing right now if they're getting back to the game, and that's dinosaurs. So the dinosaur cards have been out for about a year and a half now. They recently got a ton of support in a really cool structure deck, and if you can find that structure deck for $10, it is basically the best buy on the market right now. I will say it's pretty tricky to do that. I think nowadays their sort of market value is closer to $20 to $25. However, you can always buy the singles, but the Dino Smasher Fury structure deck has pretty much been a solid rogue strategy for a year and a half, and it doesn't really look like there's any signs of stopping, even though that deck technically does have one card on the Forbidden and Limited list, Miscellaneousaurus. The core cards, Soleidon Oviraptor and Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, don't actually find themselves on the ban list, even though they're very, very powerful. What's really cool with dinosaurs is that they're extremely splashable. You can play them with decks like Thunder Dragons, you can play them with decks like Paleozoics, which we'll talk about in a second. Dinosaurs are one of those decks that at the core strategy, they have Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, which is extremely powerful, and then you can just kind of build around it. Now, one very important addition to the deck that wasn't out when it came out was Double Evolution Pill, and that card is extremely good at summoning Ultimate Conductor Tyranno from your deck, and that's really cool. But I think what's really nice about Double Evolution Pill is that even just reading the card, you can see how it encourages you to play different strategies besides dinosaurs, because you have to banish a dinosaur and a non-dinosaur to summon a larger dinosaur from your deck. So dinosaurs, I feel, are a very good OTK, sort of aggressive based strategy that a lot of new players and returning players can get into at a relatively low price. I did mention that you can play Paleozoics in your dinosaur deck, and that certainly is true, but I think that the other end of the spectrum of a control strategy, a more trap-based deck, is Frog Paleozoics. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite strategies, and if you're an old school player, you probably know all of the frog monsters that are going in there. You have Swap Frog, you have Dupe Frog, you have Rodentodon. These were cards that were being played more than 5 years ago and were very competitive, and they're still good today. The big new addition to this strategy that wasn't out 10 years ago or whatever is totally awesome, and this card is extremely powerful. It's without a doubt the best rank 2 monster in the entire game. It provides a powerful controlling effect. It helps you OTK your opponent. It's just such an amazing card. So you make totally awesome with those frogs that you're probably familiar with, and also you make them with these Paleozoic trap cards. Now, the Paleozoic trap cards all have abilities when you activate them as a trap card, but also they all special summon themselves from the graveyard when you activate another trap card while they're in their graveyard, so you can help make yourself totally awesome over and over again. And if you don't really like the OTK style of dinosaurs, I think Frog Paleozoics are a fantastic idea. I do want to mention, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, I'm not really interested in putting a deck list for either of those strategies in this video because I feel like it dates the video too much. I do not expect either of those decks to get hit on the the ban list for quite a while, so I want this video to be as useful for someone finding it 5 or 6 months after it was created as it is today. So I think the best idea, if you are interested in either of those two strategies, you can obviously look them up on YouTube and try to find a recent version of them. Now, like I said, I've posted many deck profiles with dinosaurs and with frog Paleozoics. You're free to look those up, but I think that even better would just be to find some more recent builds of those strategies. It doesn't have to necessarily be a tournament topping build, but just get an idea of what's out there by sort of looking on YouTube or tcgplayer.com to get an idea of what people are playing. The last deck that I want to talk about maybe isn't as future-proof as those previous strategies, and that's Altergeist. Now, Altergeist are cards that you're probably not familiar with. They're fairly new within the last year here, and obviously I'm going to be biased here because if you follow my channel, you know that I play a lot of Altergeist. I've been playing them for like 8 months now, and I have a lot of fun with them, but I'm mentioning them because once again, they have a fairly low buy-in for the actual core Altergeist cards. They play very similarly to Frog Paleozoics. They're a trap-based strategy. You don't have to memorize long strings of combos, and you'll win a lot of games with Altergeist even without the expensive cards. But once again, just like Frog Paleozoics and just like dinosaurs and just like a lot of the decks that I mentioned in this video, you can add expensive cards like Infinite Impermanence, like Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, when you finally invest into the game more, but you don't have to have those cards when you first build the deck. And I also mentioned Altergeist in this video, even though I maybe wasn't going to, just because I know from your guys' tweets that many people that watch my channel that are getting back into the game have bought Altergeist, and that's really awesome. You don't necessarily have to play the decks that I play, even though many of the ones in this video obviously I've already profiled, but I think what the most important thing of a returning new player to actually do is just start playing. Either get your friends interested in the game, play some fun matches with structure decks or starter decks, or if you have a local tournament near you or not even that far from you, I mean if it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes, maybe you can make the trip like once a month or whatever. It's just important to get your hands on some cards and actually sit down and play the game so that you can experience what 2018 or 2019 Yu-Gi-Oh! Is really like, to see if you really want to fully invest yourself back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I think that this is just a question that I get asked so often, both in the comments and in tweets and in live streams, that I thought it was really important to actually make a video sort of addressing the returning players. And also I feel that many of the things that I said in this video, especially in terms of what to buy and what not to buy, can be applied to someone that's a new player, not necessarily just a returning player. Although in the case of a new player looking to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! For the first time, you probably want to start smaller with things like starter decks and structure decks before you buy a fully fledged sort of strategic deck that might be a little bit too complicated for someone just starting out. Thank you guys so much for watching though. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to put them in the comment section below. I'll see you later. Goodbye.